Hello, and welcome to the Between and Within Subjects lecture. So today, we're going to discuss some more precise designs when it comes to experiments. Keep in mind that these are applicable to experiments. So for Between and Within Subjects, I've talked about them before. We've talked about them in activities a little bit, but here I am about to get up in it. So there's two different kinds of designs you can have for your subjects, for your participants. The first I'm going to discuss is between. So with this, when you have two or really any number of conditions, a between subjects design means that each participant you have is only in one of those conditions. They're not in any more, they're just in one and then they're done. So my common example of, testing students in a quiet condition when they're taking an exam and then having participants tested in a noisy condition when taking the same exam. Between subjects design would say if you had 100 participants, 50 of them would be in the noisy condition, 50 would be in the quiet, and they wouldn't switch. So those same 50 participants who took the test in the noisy condition, they would not come back at a later time and take it in the quiet condition. They only take it in the one condition. So they only take it in the noisy room. However, the problem is with between subjects design is that you can have extraneous or confounding variables. Keep in mind that extraneous variables are things outside of the experimenter's control that can apply to changes in the dependent variable, whereas confounding variables, you can kind of think of it as another independent variable, where maybe the groups that you have, the people who test in the quiet versus the people who test the noisy condition, maybe just by sheer accident, there's a lot of people in the noisy condition who are well versed in the topic. So is it the quiet or noisy condition that's causing the change in the test scores, the dependent variable, or is it the fact that one of your conditions had, one of the participants in one of your conditions just had previous experience and that's why they performed better, had nothing to do with the environment of the room? That's a confounding variable, an unintended independent variable that the experimenter, again, was not measuring for. It was an accident. So how do we control for these confounding or extraneous variables? What do we do? Well, you have random assignment. So when you have each participant come in, again, this is for between subjects design, where one participant gets one condition and then they're done. They don't flip-flop. So with random assignment, it's saying that each and every single participant, let's say you have 100 of them, each of your participants has the exact same probability of being in one condition or the other. Or if you have more than two, one or the other or the other or the other or the other. So you can achieve this by flipping a coin, maybe doing a random number generator where, someone comes in saying, I'm here for your experiment, I'm here for the study. You can flip a coin and say, oh, heads, so you're going to be in this room. Maybe you assign heads to be the noisy condition and tails is the quiet condition. So people come up to you, you flip a coin, oh, you're in tails, you're in quiet condition. Oh, you're heads, so you're in this condition. Although you won't tell them, you're in the noisy room. You'll just say, you'll go in room A, you'll go in room B, or what have you. Another way, like I said, is the random number generator. Same concept. You could, have a number generator of 1 to 2 if you have two conditions, or 1 to 3 if you have 3, etc. But participants come up to you and you click the number generator and then, oh, you're number 2, so I guess you're going to be in the quiet room, or whatever you assign to be numbers 1 or 2. One reason why random assignment works is that through this, it's kind of providing each of your groups an equal-ish set of participants in each group. So if you were to, let's say you have 100 participants and you have the first 50 that come in, they're in the noisy room, let's say, and the last 50 that come in, they're in the quiet room. Well, that is not random assignment, even though it seems random because the people, you're not assigning who's coming up to you first, second, third, up to 55 or up to 100. You're kind of letting them decide in terms of how they get assigned. But the point of that is it's not random assignment because each participant does not have the same probability of being selected for one condition or the other. It's already been stated, the first 50 that come in, they are definitely going to be in the noisy condition, and the last 50 are definitely going to be in the quiet condition. There's no random assignment. There's a 100% chance if you're participant 49 that you're going to be in the noisy group, and there's a 100% chance if you are the last person to walk in that they are going to be in the quiet group. So excuse me, by having random assignment, it allows us to have this law of random where for the most part the participants in each groups are going to be relatively equal. Now, you still might have some confounding variables just by sheer chance because of this random assignment, but by having random assignment, by randomly assigning your participants to one condition or the other, by having each participant have the exact same probability to be in one group or the other, it's going to definitely ensure that you limit those confounding variables. So I mentioned the first 50 and last 50 being in one condition or the other as a wrong way to implement random assignment. The reason for that is maybe the first 50 that came in, you have to think of little confounding variables. Maybe the first 50 that came in, they're more punctual. They are just more willing to be on time. Maybe they live closer. The last 50 that came in, they might not be as punctual. They might have been having a rough day, run into traffic. Either way, but those are different things that can contribute to how they perform on this exam that they're having to take in a noisy or quiet condition. And again, maybe people who are punctual, those first 50 people that came in, maybe they study better, maybe they have different study habits, maybe they are just more, well, being more punctual, they're kind of more organized, more on top of it, so that might help them understand material better. But again, that is not something that you're measuring for. Again, our independent variable for this experiment was, do participants perform better in a noisy or a quiet test condition? We're not asking about, oh, their punctuality or their organized or how well they stay organized. So in order to control for that, true random assignment where they come up to you and instead of saying, oh, you're the second person to come in, so you're definitely going to go into the noisy room. Second person, third person, 50th person, doesn't matter. Everyone has the exact same probability of being in the noisy or the quiet condition. So flip a coin, do a random number generator, whatever you want to do. Just make sure each person has the exact same chance of being in one group or the other. So one sort of between subjects design that I'm sure you guys are at least familiar with or have heard of is where we have placebo. So we have treatments and control. We have a treatment condition and a control condition, or the placebo and or. So let's say that you're testing a new drug, an antidepressant. So the treatment condition will receive that drug. They'll receive your Zoloft or whatever new antidepressant you're testing, you know, whatever you want to call it. Probably don't call it Zoloft because Zoloft's going to get pissed. But anyway, you have this new treatment that you're testing. So half of your participants get that treatment, get your new antidepressant medication that you're trying to test for its effectiveness. The other group gets a control, or they just get a placebo. It's a sugar pill. It's not really any active ingredient for antidepressant symptoms in there. It's just there to say, hey, here's a pill. So you compare these two, you know, they take it for 2 weeks or a week or a month or however long that you feel is a good enough time to really test for changes. And you compare the two groups. You see, oh, well, if they're performing at equal amounts, because the placebo group is still going to notice an improvement because of the placebo effect. You give someone a pill and say, this is going to help your nausea, or this is going to help your depression, or whatever. Just the very fact that you've given them a pill, regardless if there's actually any antidepressive medications in it, the fact that you've given them this pill, they're going to feel they're better. But the difference between the treatment, which is the actual medication, and the placebo is that the treatment conditions should have much higher levels of improvement if it's in fact effective. If the placebo and treatment groups are performing the same, if they're if they're reporting the same amount of improvement, then chances are your treatment, your experimental drug that you're testing isn't really that effective if it's performing at the same pace as the sugar pill, as the nothing pill, the placebo. So there are different kinds of control conditions. There is the placebo that I mentioned, where you have a pill that doesn't really do anything other than, here, take this pill that's full of sugar or whatever. And then the no treatment control is they don't get anything. They don't even get a placebo. You're just saying like, hey, we're going to monitor you for the next 2 weeks. Keep doing you, boo. Whereas the treatment condition is still receiving that antidepressant, or again, whatever medication that it is you're testing. So that is another sort of between subjects design. Now it's important that where you're testing for a treatment for a depressive pill or really any sort of medication, it's important that that stays in a between subjects design, not a within subjects design. And I'll go into what a within subjects design is and why treatment and control is best kept in a between subjects design later. So there are certainly benefits to between subjects design. Again, this is where one person gets one condition to an experiment and that's it. Participants, the first benefit is that participants are not aware that there's other conditions. You're not going to say, oh, you know, I flip a coin, you're going to be in the noisy room. You're in the noisy room. There's 2 rooms you could have gone in, but you're just going to go in the noisy room. When you don't tell your participants what condition they're going into, I mean, that's going to bias them. But they don't know. They just think, oh, I'm here for the experiment. And then you send them off to whatever room they've been assigned to through random assignment. And they think, okay, this is it. So with them not being aware of other conditions, it's not really letting them bias that. So in the same sense of not being aware, those conditions also don't influence the participants. If they don't, excuse me, if they're not experiencing the both condition, if they're not experiencing both or all of the conditions, depending how many conditions you have, it's not going to influence them. And we'll get into that as to why that's a benefit within subjects design when we talk about some of the drawbacks of it. And there's no carryover effects. Again, this is something that is present. A carryover effect is something that's present within subjects design. We'll get into those. Some concerns or some drawbacks to it is that even if you use random assignment, one group can just be better at the task than the other simply because of the participants you have. Doesn't necessarily have to do with the conditions you've split them into, how you manipulated the independent variable. Confounding variables can still occur. There is always that chance. So the variance or the variability between the groups can vary drastically. You know, like I said, some groups can be just better at performing the tasks than others, but the variance, again, the variability, the dispersion within the data set, within the group 1 and group 2, that can just vary at different paces just because you're using different people. And then it's difficult to make equal group sizes. You know, you could have 100 participants, but if you're going to do the coin flipping method or even the random number generator method for true random assignment, there's always a chance that, you know, yes, coin is a 50-50, you know, flip. You can either get heads or tails, but I'm sure we flipped coins or done something or other. Even if you flip a coin 100 times, there is no guarantee you're going to get a perfect 50-50. It might be like 47-53 or a little off, but it can be difficult to make equal group sizes when you have a between subjects design. Now, with that being said, we've talked about the downfalls and the benefits of between subjects design. We've talked about what it is. We've talked about some instances that can only be between subjects, the treatment and control, which again, I'll explain why that is later. But now let's get into within subjects design. So this, whereas between subjects design is where one participant is only in one condition, within subject design is where one participant experiences all the conditions. So every single participant that you have in your study is going to be taking part in all of your conditions. So if you're going to do the noisy and quiet condition test that we've been talking about, you know, participants will come in, maybe, you know, oh, come in on a Tuesday, come in and take our test, you know, and they happen to be in the quiet condition first. Maybe the next day they come back, or a week later, or however you set it up. The next time they come in, they'll be in the opposite condition, but it's still the same person and they're experiencing both the noisy and quiet testing environments. So some of the benefits within subjects design is that the participants act as their own control. So if you're going to compare test scores, what better way to do that than with the exact same person taking the same test twice, you know? If you're going to be comparing totally different groups of people on a test, well, I mean, you always have that confounding variable of, well, this group can just know the material better. We don't know. But since we're using the same people, that's not a possibility. Group confounders are not possible because, like I said, it's the exact same people taking the exact same test. So we don't have to worry about, oh, some of our group might have had experience in research methods while the other group didn't. No, whatever groups you got for your within subjects design, whatever participants you have, they're still going to have the same amount of experience next time they take it. And of course, with within subjects design, whereas for between, we had the issue of having equal group sizes. Well, that's obviously not a problem with within subjects design. Both of your conditions, the noisy or quiet conditions, since everyone is participating in both conditions, guaranteed you're going to have the same number of participants in each condition. So some concerns. I mentioned how between subjects design does not have carryover effects. Well, within subjects design does. So let me explain some carryover effects. There are 3 different types that we're going to get into. They all fall under the umbrella of a carryover effect. So the first is a practice effect, where participants are better at the task simply because they've been practicing it more. So you have people in, you know, your 2 conditions. Maybe you're doing like simple math. Like if you remember elementary school where you got that like paper that had all the multiplication tables on it and stuff, and you had to do that. Well, if you have a between subjects design, and maybe you do the same thing, maybe you have a quiet and a noisy condition and they're giving these math multiplication tables to do. Maybe you give them like a minute or something and you compare the 2. Well, if it's between subjects design, we don't have to worry about any carryover effects because they do one condition and they're done. However, within subjects design, let's say, like we said, we have the noisy and quiet condition, they're given the multiplication tables. Well, they come in for the quiet condition first and they do the multiplication tables. You know, it's like, oh, it's been a while since I've done this. Oh, I'm getting back into it now. The second time they do it in the opposite condition, I started with the quiet, so now they're in the noisy condition. Second time they do it, they might be performing better because it's all coming back to me now, and I just finished doing all these multiplication tables, so I've been practicing in the last time I was in this experiment. The last time I came in and I was in the other condition, I was practicing working on these multiplication tables. So now I'm doing it faster simply because the last time I came in, I've done this already. So I'm getting better at it, getting faster, getting more accurate maybe. Well, accuracy isn't necessarily something that happens, but they can just be doing better. So the fatigue effect, it's kind of the opposite of the practice effect. Whereas the practice effect, the more they do something, the better they get at it because they're practicing. The fatigue effect is saying the opposite. They're doing the same thing, it's monotonous, and so they get tired of repeating the same thing. They're tired of just going through all these multiplication tables, or, you know, maybe you have them do a Stroop test and they're just getting tired of like, okay, so the word says green, but the color of the words is blue. So I have to write down blue. Oh God, I'm so tired of doing this. They might perform worse because of the fatigue effect. Again, they're just kind of tired of doing it. They're burnt out. Finally, the context effect is how being exposed to one condition may influence performance in later conditions. So this is true for the treatment and control, where I was talking about, you know, the antidepressant medications and the placebo, or just the no treatment control whatsoever. The context effect can be a problem for within subjects if you were to do that for within subjects. So they can take the antidepressant medication first and perform really well on it because it's actually effective. And then, you know, you give them 2 weeks on the treatment, and then 2 weeks later, they're once the treatment condition is up, their 2 weeks is gone, they've taken the actual medication for 2 straight weeks. At the end of that 2-week period, then here, take the placebo. I mean, you won't tell them, here's the placebo. You're not supposed to know which one they have, but you give them the other condition, the placebo, and they're doing that. And they're still, maybe the reason why they're doing better is the context effect. If the antidepressant was actually working, their scores, their performance, their, you know, depression levels shouldn't be very lowered that much because their treatment that they went through for those first 2 weeks is still carrying over into the next condition, into the placebo. So the placebo might state they're doing a lot better, but it's simply because they had just finished with the actual medication that did make them better. Another idea of the context effect, another example, would be if you were to have an experiment where you're given a brief description of a crime. Maybe Bob punched an old lady, took her purse, and ran off. And you have the same description for each. So it's always Bob punched an old lady, took her purse, and ran off. That description stays the same. However, the picture that you have, maybe one of the pictures of Bob is an attractive person, and the other picture of Bob is a not so attractive person. Those are your conditions. Everything's the same, the crimes are the same, and you have a condition of the participant sees that crime with an attractive person being the perpetrator, being the criminal, and a condition where the participant sees a non-attractive person portraying that same crime, taking part in that same crime. And let's say the dependent variable is, I don't know, a series of sentence, like how long a sentence should be or how harsh a punishment should be. Well, typically, my hypothesis would be that the attractive person would be given less harsh sentences. There's the attractiveness issue where people that are attractive are seen as more trustworthy, seen as more honest, more intelligent. So there's a lot of bias towards attractive people. So in that study, I'd hypothesize that the attractive people, even though the descriptions of the crime are the exact same thing, the attractive people will have a less harsh sentence in comparison to the unattractive people. However, where the context effect comes in is maybe, you get exposed to the not attractive person first, and you say, oh, well, that's pretty terrible. I'm going to give him, I don't know, 5 years. I'm just winging it. So I'm going to give him 5 years. And then, you come back to the same, there's going to be different people and different crimes. So you're not going to just see ugly Bob and then have the crime for the punching the old lady and stealing her shit and leaving. You're going to have a little bit of in between, but eventually they'll come back to, now they have the attractive person, same crime, and they might think, oh God, this attractive person, well, I gave the ugly person 5 years, so, well, maybe he was trying to help his family. He looks really trustworthy and nice. I'll just give him 3 years. He probably had a reason for decking that old lady. Vice versa, too. It works to where you see the attractive person first, and maybe you're thinking, oh, that's awful. I'm going to give this dude, I don't know, 5 years again. But then you see the ugly person later on. Oh, God, that's awful. I'm going to give him 10 years or something. So the fact that you've been exposed to either this attractive or unattractive person might influence how harshly you judge them for the next round, either the unattractive or attractive person, whoever you didn't see first. So ways to control for the context effect, where again, the exposure to one and then the exposure to one of the conditions is influencing your outcome for the other, would be to counterbalance. So whereas between subjects, we had random assignment to participants in terms of which condition they were going to be in, because again, between subjects, you're in one condition and you're done. So for that, random assignment meant, what condition are you going to be in for between? But for within subjects, it is counterbalancing. And instead of randomly assigning participants to a condition, doesn't matter for within, they're going to be in both, or however many you have. For counterbalancing, the random assignment that takes place here is the order that you have them. So they can flip a coin, or they can just do random number generator. But either way, some participants might see the ugly person first and then the attractive person, And then the other half of participants will see the attractive person first and then the ugly person. So this kind of counterbalances the idea of that context effect. It kind of helps to eliminate that, because then not all of your data is seeing ugly then pretty or pretty and then ugly. It's a mix. So you have a better idea of what's going on, the difference between the harshness of judgments between ugly and attractive people, or I should say non-attractive people. Ugly is rather harsh itself. Jesus. So with this being said, how do you know? How do you know if you're going to need to do a between or within subjects design? Well, within subjects is probably best, because like I said, you don't have to worry about confounding variables. It's the same people being tested on both or however many conditions you have. So you have that instant control of people serving as their own control. However, within subjects can be a little difficult, because you need to have the time for participants to sit down for both conditions, or maybe they have to come back depending on what it is that you're doing. You have to be able to properly counterbalance. So you have to be able to make sure that there's a mixture of people doing condition A then B, as well as other people doing conditions B then A. And you just don't have any of those serious carryover effects. So the fatigue or practice effect won't really be an issue. That would be best for choosing a within subjects design. However, sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes we don't really have the time available to get participants to come back. Or sometimes we don't have time to properly counterbalance based on what our conditions are. Maybe they're just really time consuming, or it's just too hard to switch. Maybe you only have the equipment, if you need equipment for whatever reason. Maybe you only have that for a designated day, and you can't really get people to do within subjects design and counterbalance if you only have one day to get everyone to get in there. It doesn't really work. So if it proves to be difficult or even impossible, between subjects is probably best. Both are right. You can't really go wrong with either. But there could be a better selection depending on what your experiment is. However, again, like I said, if it's just impossible or too difficult or labor intensive to do within subjects design, well, between subjects will be fine as well. So like I said, with the treatment and control example, where you have the conditions, well, the treatment condition might perform better on any task because they've already received the treatment if they're doing the counterbalance. So it doesn't really matter that you've done that counterbalancing. You still have people that are influenced by this treatment that is actually making them better, or actually having them perform better, or what have you. So it's best to just keep that as between subjects. That way we don't have to worry about any sort of carryover effect, no matter what. Even if we've controlled for it, you're still going to have a bit of a carryover with that sort of design. And that's it. That is between and within subjects design. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, message me through Canvas, or stop by my office hours. If you haven't already, make sure you do that. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your week. And I have enjoyed lecturing on between and within subjects design with you. So don't forget to like and subscribe.